What's up, YouTube? I'm ProTech. I'm one of the top Starcraft 2v2 players in the world, and today I've got another video for you. Hey guys, welcome to another video. I'm going to be doing a replay analysis of a bunch of games that I played today. Now, I didn't record these because I just overclocked my computer and I optimized my computer, and I literally went from playing at like 150 FPS to 400 FPS. And I was just more or less using these as tests to see whether or not, you know, the overclocking would work. But I did play a bunch of games today, and I'm going to go ahead and do a replay analysis of these games and break them down and, you know, kind of give you guys my thought process while I was playing. Alright, boys, so we have a, this is a ZVZ. I am spawning down here in the bottom right corner, and my teammate is spawning in, or excuse me, my opponent is spawning in the top left corner here. So generally when I play 1v1 in ZVZ, I like to be really aggressive. And the reason for this is because I like to set the pace of the game in my own way. I like to take control of the game. Now, this isn't recommended for everybody. It's not necessarily recommended for you. But it's my own personal play style. So at the start of the game, I know that I am playing random and that I have the advantage in the fact that my opponent does not know what my race is, right? So there's a very good chance that he's not even going to send his overlord in a path like where he's going to scout mine in fear of, you know, me spawning his Terran, right? So that's just kind of one of the things that's in my mind. You know, me trying to figure out like what build I want to go for and this, that, and the other thing. But in this game, instead of going for an early pull, I decided to go for just a standard open. Some friendly banter going on in this game. But I see that he's kind of like running his mouth, and typically when you play games who people run their mouth, honestly, I'm not like just saying this, like I've played a massive amount of games in my time, right? And a pattern that I see is that they're generally not that good. So after this banter, I was kind of feeling pretty confident. But you'll notice that if you were paying attention to the overlords crossing the map here, I never ran into an overlord, right? So I could have actually probably got away with an early pool build, right? Let's take a look at his build. He's gone for no gas, which you absolutely never want to do in this matchup. Unless you plan on spamming queens, which I suppose then you may or may not be able to get away with it. But I don't think that this open is good in ZVZ. And, I mean, to be fair, I'm playing random so he doesn't know, right? But I wouldn't recommend going for a gasless open in ZVZ. Not in Legacy of the Void. But anyway, the point I was making was that, you know, he hasn't seen an overlord, so he doesn't even know what my race is, right? So, with that information, from this point forward, I'm just kind of more or less assuming that he's probably done something pretty greedy. And so if we open up the production tab, we can see that I am going for the Baneling Nest, and I'm just saturating up my my natural a little more here. And so my decision to go for this Baneling Nest and hide it, because, okay, look, normally you don't normally want a sim city like this, right? You want to put your, like, this spawning pool is kind of a mistake. you don't want to do this. You want to put the spawning pool like right here, and you want to leave a little gap here in ZVZ. And the reason for this is because you can put your queen in here, there's a little nook, it can't get killed. And the same goes for the baneling nest. The second structure, 9 times out of 10, I will put like somewhere here or like over here and create this little nook so that my queen can sit in, so that if my opponent does go for a Zergling spam, then my queen can't just get immediately killed, right? You can go into that little space right there and save her. The spawning pool was a mistake, but the baneling nest was not a mistake. And the reason I did this, and the reason I put this here, was because he didn't... His first Overlord went down this way, and he didn't actually see my Overlord. So he didn't know what my race was. And so if he sends his Lord here, and like, you know, this way a little bit, let's say, for example, I put my baneling nest here, or I put it up here to create a wall, then he's going to see it. So by putting it back here, he doesn't see it. And that was kind of the idea and like the thought process behind doing that. And so I still, you know, when I poke up into the base here, I can see that he has a lot of drones. So at this point, and a spine crawler. So at this point, I know that he's playing some kind of a gasless open or some kind of a really greedy open, right? And so my goal, because he hasn't gone for like a wall at the front here, is to do something about this saturation. That's what I'm looking to do right now. And so I queue up a bunch of speedlings here. Now this, of course, is more or less a gamble, because I don't actually know what's behind in his base here. And you can see, like, when I scout into his base, I can see that there's 2 queens here, right? But there isn't a 3rd queen down here. So I don't know what's back here. Like, sometimes you'll see players do this, and they'll be doing, like, a crazy-ass all-in, right? I just don't have the information. And that's part of the reason why I decided to do this attack, because he's trying his hardest to hide shit, right? And I'd rather be the initiator than the... I would rather be the aggressor rather than the defender. Now, I knew that this Overlord was here, so I set my rally point to right here, so that all of my units that were coming out of my hatcheries didn't get spotted by this Overlord, right? And these are little things that you need to pay attention to when you're playing your games, right? Because this Overlord was chilling here for a little while, and I scouted this, so I knew that this was here. And if I like set my rally points like right here, like right on the Overlord that I know is there, well, then he's going to be even more prepared for it, right? And then behind this attack, because I've gone for, you know, a pretty reasonable saturation at my natural, I'm going to take a 3rd base, because I know that I'm not at an advantage, but I have the map presence at the moment, and I know this based off of what I've scouted. So I know that I can take this 3rd base and still be relatively safe. And then here, it's just, you know, my goal is to do something about this drone line. Whether I kill drones or I get them off of the drone line, that's the goal here. Which I succeed at. Because, and all the while I'm doing this push, I'm making drones behind it, right? So, if we look at the income tab, we can see that, yes, I went for this push, but I pulled all of his workers off the line, and now I'm back up in workers, right? So my economy, even though his economy was better, because of the decisions that I made in this game, now my economy is better. Now I've got a way better economy, right? Now, at this point, the reason I decided to throw it on the Roach Warren was because he had Zerglings coming out of his, like when I did this attack, he had Zerglings that were coming out of his eggs. But they didn't have speed. So I know that he didn't put gas into evolving his Zerglings at this point, right? So it could either be like a fast lair Mutalisk play, or the more common thing, which is the Roach Warren. Like, that's basically what what everybody does in ZVZ, and they've been doing for like a long period of time, right? So I decide to go into the Roach Warren, and it was more or less a gamble because I didn't scout anything. Had this been Spire, I would have needed to do something else. I mean, you really always want to have the Roach Warren just because it's 150 resources. It's nothing when you have this type of saturation. But that was the reasoning behind why I took that Roach Warren at this time. And then, you know, from here, I'm just kind of trying to make things happen with the units that I produce. A lot of people, what they'll do is they won't do anything with the shit that they make, and it's just kind of like dead weight, right? Like, there's no reason to not be active with the shit that you've made, right? So just poke around, you know, try to catch things. Now, there are a couple of mistakes that I made here, and the main reason for this is because I'm just not familiar with the map, and I'm not familiar with, like, the play styles and, you know, shit like that in 1v1. But what needed to happen here was I needed to have an Overlord at this location, and I needed to have an Overlord at this location. And the reason for this is because you can park your Overlords here for free, and you can see the timing of the third bases for free in ZVZ. That's just how it works. So this was a mistake that I made that I have to correct. And, you know, again, I know that I have the map presence. I can see everything on the map. You know, if he pushes out this Overlord right here, I've put it back far enough so that a Queen can't just come out and snipe it. And so I'm always going to know, like, if units are coming out. So I know right now that I'm safe to make workers. And tech up to a lair and get my evolution chambers and, you know, this, that, and the other thing. So once again, just being proactive with my units. Getting roach speed, getting upgrades, saturating my third. And if you've noticed, like, these little pokes that I've been doing, it has been pulling him off of the line for, like, so many times. So, I mean, look at the income tab. Every time you pull workers off of your line, it really fucks the flow of the game up for you. It really puts a damper on your production and, you know, this, that, and the other thing. So you really, if you know you're up against an aggressive Zerg, like myself, for example, you really need to do things like build an evolution chamber wall up at the front, and then, like, put your Roach Warren here, and then have, like, a little wall going on so that you don't... This right here doesn't happen all the time. Because it screws over your economy, and every time that happens, it just puts you further and further ahead. It puts your opponent further and further behind. So at this point, let's see. I didn't actually know whether he took a third or not because I wasn't paying too close attention to this location on the map. So I didn't actually know whether he had a third or not, but I just kind of more or less assumed that he didn't. And at this point, I'm feeling pretty confident in my ability to actually win this game because I just assumed that my third base was up and running, his wasn't. And at this point, this is why I stopped making workers. Like, I just droned up my third base to 7 drones here, and then I just started mass producing units because at this point, I know that because I've pulled his workers off of his line so many times, that my economy is going to be way better, and that my army should be better if I stop making workers now and go for the kill. It's called a kill move. not to mention he's been on 2 bases, as far as I know, for like a really long period of time now. And I kind of need to have an army at this point. So here we're just crossing the map. We're poking around. Now when I made this push, I got a little overconfident because at the first part of this engagement you could see that he had like half of his army there, right? And I was not expecting this, although I should have expected something like this just because he hadn't been on a second or a third base for like so long. But I overstepped my bounds here and kind of got pooped on at this push a little bit, which was a mistake. And then the other thing that I did here was that I shouldn't have pushed right now. I should have waited for 1-1, right? And this was just a mistake on my part. I checked his upgrade and I knew that he had 1-0. But you don't want to take this fight until you have these upgrades. And the reason being is because his army is technically better than mine, but I'm gonna have one upgrade advantage, right? So if I had waited for this, like if I had waited for +1 here, and yes, this freaking 2-3 second window really does matter. I actually probably could have won this if I had just waited for 1-1, but I've taken too many shots here without 1-1, and so I can't win this. Not to mention, I mean, he's got Ravagers in the background, which, you know, they do right now. They're doing +2 more damage because of the upgrade, right? And I don't have any damage mitigation. So this was a mistake. This attack was definitely a mistake. And then I fucked up my rally point here and messed that up. Almost lost. I definitely took way more damage than I should have, but I almost lost 2 roaches there. I lost 1 for free for no reason. But, you know, I can tell by looking at his army that he doesn't have a third base. And so all I have to do at this point, now that I have my upgrade, is just kind of, you know, go in for pop shots and take 1 out, take 2 out. Even if I lose 1 or 2, that's fine because my production is just that much better. Not to mention, if you're like a fast player, like me for example, I'm a really fast player. I play at like 300 APM, right? This guy only plays at 166. You can, if you know that you're a fast player, you can tax players by harassing them, and it will fuck up their flow. Like they'll miss injects, or they'll miss micro, or they'll forget to saturate their gases, or you know, it messes with their play style when you play overly aggressive sometimes, because they just kind of get frantic. They kind of get you know, they just fall into a bad state of mind and they don't play their A game, right? And then from here, I know that I'm not going to lose this. There's no possible way I can lose this. But when we look at the supplies, it's actually pretty scary, right? You know, considering this guy is only just now getting his third base up, he's got a pretty sizable army, right? I mean, his army is actually better than mine, which is incredible. When I poked up the ramp, I about shit my pants. But see, the reason I decided to take this engagement was because I clicked on his units and I knew that he didn't have armor, and so I knew that my army was technically better. So as you can see, it's just my army is superior in terms of the damage mitigation and the damage output. And not to mention, I know at this point that my production is better. So even if I were to have gone down to like the same amount of roaches, it doesn't matter because I'm just going to be able to reinforce better, right? So, moral of the story here is that when you're in a ZVZ, you should really always just wall. with like evolution chambers and roach warrens and stuff like that, because I mean, ZVZ is a really volatile matchup, and most people are going to want to end the game sooner than later, because when you get into like the later stages of the game, it's easier to lose because there are more variables, right? And that's the general ideology of games. And for me, I'm not a very good macro player, and I know this. So I try to end the game at about 10 minutes, at about 15 minutes, you know, something like that. Of course, that's all just preference. You can play however you want, but, you know, it doesn't change the fact that the later that you get into the game, the easier it is to lose, right? So that's going to be it for this replay analysis. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you with the next video. Thank you very much for checking out my video today. If you like my videos, smash that like button, comment with what you want to see next, subscribe to see more, and be sure to follow all of my social media links in the description below. You can also donate by clicking the bubble at the bottom left of the screen, and this of course allows me to continue producing this content on a full-time basis. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you with the next video.